Hillary Clinton takes on a heckler as anger grows in the last days of a bitter election battle. With polls tightening, her patience snapped as a campaigner made accusations over her husband, Bill.
I am sick and tired of the negative, dark, divisive, dangerous vision and behavior of people who support Donald Trump.
We'll have all the latest from the campaign trail, also on News at 10. A warning notice served on Sir Philip Green tonight. The pensions regulator starts enforcement action over BHS. The English and Scottish FAs defy FIFA on poppies. Players will wear them and ignore the ban. Anger in South Africa, mounting calls for President Zuma's resignation over allegations of corruption. And clearing Calais, the last remaining children bussed away, but who will offer them a home?
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. Sensing that her lead in the polls is narrowing, Hillary Clinton stuck to her campaign timetable today, but abandoned her script as she fought to hang on to her position as front-runner. With 6 days to go and counting, Mrs. Clinton used some of her strongest language yet to attack Donald Trump and his supporters, branding them negative, dark, divisive and dangerous. Mrs. Clinton has been getting some high-powered help in attacking Mr. Trump. President Obama called him unqualified to be commander-in-chief.
Hillary Clinton is focusing on just a few key battleground states, as if her political life depends on it. And of course it does. This has become a highly competitive race, with 5 days left. Last night at a Florida rally, she was interrupted by a protester.
I love this country. I think we already are great. Now,
As he accused Bill Clinton of being a rapist, she responded with fury.
and you know, I am sick and tired of the negative, dark, divisive, dangerous vision and behavior of people who support Donald Trump. It is time for us to say no. We are not going backwards. We're going forward into a brighter future.
That Mrs. Clinton is in some political trouble is clear from the need to deploy the biggest gun of them all. President Obama was here in North Carolina, in front of a university crowd. He urged them, implored them to vote, knowing that young Americans are a key constituency for Mrs. Clinton. He even invoked on her behalf the old slogan from his very first campaign.
Stand up and reject cynicism. Stand up and reject fear. Choose hope. Choose hope. Choose hope. Choose hope. Choose hope. Vote.
If the president can make a difference anywhere, it is here, a battleground state with a large African-American population. But has that famous, that legendary coalition of Obama voters, has it now dispersed? It certainly is fraying. In early voting, for example, the turnout of African Americans appears to be down, an ominous sign for Democrats. And even some of those voting for Mrs. Clinton, like Leslie Kearney, told us they're casting their ballots primarily out of fear of an America under Trump.
We're scared that this man might get in office. So I feel our fear is what's going to motivate us to vote. Hillary is not without flaws. I'm not saying that this woman is, she's not without flaws. But if you compare the two, I'd rather deal with her flaws than his.
The president fired up the crowd, but it is still not clear if the loyalty of the political army he mobilized 4 and 8 years ago can be transferred to Mrs. Clinton, his former rival, now the woman he is counting on to keep his legacy intact. Robert Moore, News at 10, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
And you might have thought that Donald Trump will be glad the polls are getting ever closer in the presidential election, but today, in the all-important state of Florida, his message to his supporters was don't believe it. He's worried about complacency, so he told them, get out and vote, pretend we're slightly behind. Well, the key states to watch on election night will be the ones with the tightest races and the highest populations, such as Ohio, Texas and Pennsylvania. And the biggest prize of all, Florida, always close and often the key to victory. The experts say Donald Trump can't win without it. It's a state divided politically, just as the motorway called Interstate 4 divides it geographically. This road from Tampa to Orlando through to Daytona could lead all the way to the White House.
Florida is in his grasp. It's his ticket to the White House, and so Donald Trump has beaten a path to its door. 3 rallies in one day and just one message.
The polls are all saying we're going to win Florida. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. Get out there and vote. Pretend we're slightly behind. You got to get out. We don't want to blow this. This is the one chance we have. It'll never happen again.
Nowhere do votes matter more than here. This is the most fiercely contested electoral land in America. Those who live either side of the Interstate Highway 4, which cuts through the Sunshine State, may decide if Donald Trump gets to the White House.
In the final days of this election, both candidates have been blitzing Florida. But so far, the Republicans believe that the momentum is with them.
441 at the window.
Those we found taking a break off the highway illustrated the racial divisions amongst voters here.
Trump.
And you?
Trump as well.
I'm probably voting for Trump. That's what I'm leaning towards.
And it's the undecided or just decided who matter now.
I'd probably changed my mind here recently. I guess a lot of dirty laundry has been aired that nobody knew about, that was undisclosed to us.
And you've changed your mind which way?
I'm going Trump.
But the Latino vote at the early voting booths is out in force, up 4% since 2008. And with 15% of voters here Latino, that matters. Women like Monica Devane are on a mission to block Trump.
He is just so dangerous. I mean, I will try to put this into words. He's really bad for the Hispanic community, just from the things he's said alone about, building the wall to separate, Mexico from here.
And so far, African-American voter turnout is lower than expected, another factor in Donald Trump's favour. Trump has to win here to win the White House. Victory in Florida is not an option for him, it's a necessity. The polls may be in Trump's favour, but 6 days is a long time in politics. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Florida.
Well, let's return to North Carolina now and join Robert Moore. Robert, there was talk that a 13th woman would come forward tonight with fresh allegations. Has that happened?
Well, everyone suspected there might be another twist or another turn in this venomous and poisonous election campaign. And indeed, just a short time ago, there were reports that a 13th woman was due to come forward over in California to suggest that she had been sexually assaulted by Donald Trump. Now, in the last few minutes, she has abandoned that press conference to say that actually she's too scared to show her face. But it does show really how many more questions and what a deep shadow could be cast over this campaign in its final days.
And we saw earlier too, Robert, President Obama making another supportive pitch for Hillary Clinton this evening. Just how much of a difference will that make, do you think?
Well, look, he's a popular president. He's got an approval rating of 52, 53%. And he's done her 2 big favours today. He's held this big rally here to try and get out the youth vote. But the more important help he may have given to Mrs. Clinton was potentially comments he made this morning when he basically rebuked the FBI for reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. He said the FBI, the Bureau, simply should not operate on what he called leaked or incomplete information. So that will definitely be seized on by Hillary Clinton as highly supportive. Although this is a very close and competitive election, some polls have come out tonight certainly to encourage the Clinton campaign. It shows that they're up 6 percentage points in Wisconsin, 4 points in Pennsylvania. So that'll certainly calm some nerves amongst the Democrats, keep their sense of panic, temporarily at least, at bay.
OK, Robert, thank you very much indeed for that. Lots of nerves still to come, no doubt. And Robert will continue to follow the Clinton campaign right through to Election Day next Tuesday and beyond. And Penny Marshall's doing the same with Donald Trump's campaign. And also, Robert will be answering any questions you have about the elections on our Facebook page tonight, straight after News at 10. So do join him for that if you can. Now, it was back in June that Sir Philip Green sat in front of a committee of MPs and said he would try to solve the pensions crisis at BHS, the company he sold for £1. He'd try to sort it, he said. Well, now, 4 months on, it seems the pensions regulator is fed up of waiting. It has sent him an official notice warning it may use its powers to demand money from him for the BHS pension scheme. Well, our business editor, Joel Hills, is here. Joel, I mean, this is pretty strong stuff tonight. How tough is the pensions regulator planning to be, do you think?
Oh, well, look, I mean, the time for talking has ended. It leaves the door open for some sort of settlement, but clearly has lost patience with Sir Philip Green and doesn't really think that he's going to deliver on the pledge that he made to fix the pension problem. Note too, though, Julie, it's also going after Dominic Chappell, the man Sir Philip Green sold the business to a year before it finally went under. Warning notices have been issued to both men. Basically, well, this is what the pension regulator is saying. Look, you guys don't just have a moral obligation to the 20,000 people in the BHS pension scheme. You have a legal obligation, in our view. This is the start, though, of a very, very long process. Both men have the right to appeal against this. It will then go to a determinations panel, from there to the High Court, possibly even to the Supreme Court. This could take years and years and years before it's resolved, unless there is a settlement. But what is intriguing is that clearly Sir Philip Green has made some offers, none of them, though, to date deemed acceptable or credible by the pensions regulator.
And what, if anything, have we heard from Sir Philip Green and indeed some of the other parties tonight?
Well, a very intriguing statement from Sir Philip Green, acknowledges the statement from the pensions regulator tonight, notes its contents, but says he believes he has come up with a credible, substantial proposal. He doesn't say how much, because that's ultimately, Julie, what it comes down to. But my understanding was he has made an offer that is in excess of £300 million. That's not something that Green's side will confirm this evening. He says it would keep the scheme from entering the Pension Protection Fund, the bailout facility, which would see so many members lose money, and it's in order to achieve a better outcome. He notes too, and this is the really interesting thing, that the chairman of the BHS pension scheme believes this proposal is acceptable. Chris Martin is there to represent the interests of the 20,000 members. The offer, the proposal Green has made, is acceptable to him. It is a proposal he would say, put to his members and say, look, I think you should accept that, but the pensions regulator doesn't think it's good enough. It's interesting stuff.
Interesting stuff. OK, and I know you'll keep across it for us, Joel. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, the English and Scottish Football Associations tonight put themselves on a collision course with world football bosses at FIFA over England players wearing poppies in their Armistice Day match next week. Both say they will defy FIFA's ban. Their clear defiance mirrored the Prime Minister's anger at the FIFA's ruling. Mrs May called it utterly outrageous. Strong words, and that wasn't half of it.
For the Prime Minister, it was an open goal. At this time of year, on this issue, FIFA is an easy target.
I think the stance that's been taken by FIFA is utterly outrageous. I think a clear message is going from this House. We want our players to be able to wear those poppies. And I have to say to FIFA that before they start telling us what to do, they jolly well ought to sort their own house out.
FIFA believes the poppy falls under its rule forbidding any political, religious or commercial symbols on shirts. This afternoon, the FA made its intentions very clear in the absence of any compromise.
We'll be wearing poppies at Wembley. I mean, we'd rather come to an agreement with FIFA so they're happy with that. But, you know, it's inconceivable that the FA won't be sanctioning the wearing of poppies at Wembley.
The FA is not alone. Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland were all hoping FIFA would agree to make an exception, as they have done on previous occasions. But as FIFA dug its heels in, so did both Scotland and England's FAs, in near identical statements saying, "The poppy is an important symbol of remembrance and we do not believe it represents a political, religious or commercial message. They both intend to pay appropriate tribute to those who have made the ultimate sacrifice by wearing black armbands bearing poppies in their fixture on Armistice Day."
The poppy symbol appears on the black armbands being worn by the England players.
FIFA's reason for its intransigence is that it cannot make exceptions for anyone. If the world governing body is trying to rebuild its battered reputation, its stand on this issue is not helping much, not in Britain at least.
And Steve joins me now to talk about this further. So both the English and Scottish FAs really facing FIFA down on this. What happens next?
Well, we now know there's not going to be a compromise deal done, not now that the two FAs have openly defied FIFA. I mean, FIFA will continue to say that, look, we cannot make an exception for England, for Scotland. If we make exceptions for them, we're going to have to make exceptions for anyone. So I think it's inevitable that England and Scotland will face sanctions. Julie, that could be anything from a slap on the wrist to a fine, even a deduction of points in their World Cup qualifying group. But if any of those things do happen, I suspect that England and Scotland believe that they have very good grounds for appeal. Those grounds being, well, first of all, as they said tonight in their statement, they don't believe that the poppy is a symbol of political, religious or commercial connotation. So they don't think actually they're breaking any rules in the first place. And then secondly, of course, we have this precedent that you saw in my report where in 2011, FIFA did actually allow, in similar circumstances, England and indeed Scotland and others to wear poppies on black armbands. So there is a precedent set there, which I think means there is a decent grounds for appealing this. And so this row actually is quite a long way from over at this stage.
OK, Steve, thank you very much. Now, we've all got used to low inflation over the past year and a half. The Bank of England will confirm the latest figures tomorrow. But ahead of that, there was a long-term warning that this time next year it could be running at 4%. The figures have come from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, which says the post-referendum fall in sterling will push up prices.
It may seem as if it's business as usual. Bustling high streets, our factories as busy as ever. But companies across the country are already seeing their costs go up. And that'll affect all of us. Just today, Natalie Allen, who runs 2 bakeries, was sent a stark warning from her supplier that it will be putting up prices from the middle of this month. And this isn't the first bad news she's had about costs of late.
Ever since Brexit, prices have increased steadily. Butter has gone up by 50%. Then you've got flour, the price has only gone up about 10%. The Madagascan vanilla in there, that's gone up 100%.
Have you had to put your prices up?
I am in the process of putting up prices, hoping that customers won't notice too much.
Last year, inflation ran at 1%. Back in August, the Bank of England predicted that it would rise over 2%, but only in 2018. But today, the National Institute of Economic and Social Research said that inflation will hit 4% this time next year.
So why are prices expected to go up so significantly next year? This is all about the sharp drop in the value of the pound, which has fallen by a whopping 16% since the referendum vote. A weak pound means that imports will become more expensive. But that's not all. Many goods made here will see their prices go up because many of the materials used to make them are shipped in.
And when businesses' costs go up, we all pay the price. Indeed, consumers are already feeling the pinch. The cost of a jar of Marmite has gone up by 12.5% in the past few weeks. Another household named Taifu has announced their prices are set to rise too. And it's not just food. Apple laptops now cost 20% more. Not everything will go up by this much, but if inflation increases by 4% as predicted, people will still feel the pain.
Bear in mind that our wage growth is only about 2.25%. So if our pay goes up by 2.25%, but prices go up by 4%, that means we can afford to buy less goods for the same pay. That's why people will feel this in their pocket.
All eyes tomorrow will be on the Bank of England, and it's inflation that will be in the spotlight. The big question is how much inflation is the Bank of England willing to tolerate? It's a question I'll be asking the Governor. Narina Hertz, News at 10.
The name of another defenceless baby was added to the list of children murdered by a parent today. Joshua Millison was 13 days old when he was shaken to death. He suffered catastrophic brain damage. A post-mortem showed older fractures to his legs and ribs from squeezing and twisting. And this is the man who did all that in those 13 days, his father, Daniel Sanzoni. He'll be sentenced later. The judge said he needed time to reflect coolly. Anger at corruption at the heart of the government of South Africa's President Zuma has been mounting for months. There were more protests outside his office again today. Then came the release of a report into what he has been up to. It stopped short of any concrete findings, but said a judge does need to investigate. Among the claims against Mr. Zuma, that he's been giving favours to wealthy friends, including allowing them to influence the appointment of ministers.
The protests that turned briefly violent might just be the least of South Africa's problems, for these feel like decisive moments for this still young democracy. As opponents of many colours accuse their president of subverting the constitution for personal gain. But the most stinging attacks on Jacob Zuma come from within his own ruling party.
It is shocking that anyone can hand over the powers of a presidency to straight commercial interests, to the extent that even the cabinet is not chosen by him anymore, chosen by his nefarious chums. It's shocking.
Today, the president's lawyers abandoned efforts to block a high-level corruption inquiry.
The public protector is ordered to publish the report forthwith.
It implicates Mr. Zuma, his son, 3 cabinet ministers, and a wealthy Indian-born business family, the Guptas. They're accused of offering one minister a payment of £36 million, of influencing the selection of a new finance minister, and of making millions from lucrative state contracts. All those accused deny any wrongdoing, but after years of scandal, few seem to be listening.
It's one thing for opposition parties to demand the head of Jacob Zuma. The senior members of the ANC are also breaking ranks to call for his resignation. In all, it points to the biggest political crisis in this country's post-apartheid history.
And while his allies panic, adversaries scent blood.
We want it to be crystal clear that all actions that emanate from that, one, if they are criminal, Jacob Zuma must be criminally charged. He must resign now, and next week we'll exercise our actions in Parliament to say Jacob Zuma must be removed.
But Zuma won't go without a fight. The danger is the president of this proud but troubled nation will limp on, and the chaos will continue. John Ray, News at 10, Pretoria.
As incidents of violence increase and, they claim, staff numbers fall, prison officers met the Justice Secretary Liz Truss to let her know that enough is enough. They painted a disturbing picture of what is going on inside jails in England and Wales, and they've given the government a deadline of the end of next week to come up with a plan to improve things.
Behind the walls of prisons in England and Wales, violence is spiralling. Prison officers say the problem is a result of budget cuts which have led to staff shortages. This evening, their representatives met the Justice Secretary to demand action.
The last thing that we want to see is more carnage and bloodbaths in our prisons and a prison officer loses their life. Now, I can't be any clearer than that, and the union can't be any clearer than that. We are in crisis.
In the year to June, there were more than 23,000 assaults behind bars in England and Wales, up 34% on the year before. Assaults on officers hit nearly 6,000, up 43%, while 324 deaths were reported, up 21%. The government say they recently announced £14 million a year for extra prison officers. And tomorrow they're expected to announce a major prison reform programme, including handing operational and financial freedom to prison governors. The government says this is the biggest prison reform programme for a generation. But critics argue it's all very well giving governors control of their budgets, but that's of limited use when there isn't enough cash to go round in the first place. Prison officers say the consequences of that can be life-changing. Steve Goff was forced into early retirement after a brutal attack at this prison in Leeds.
He knocked me out with one punch. He proceeded to stamp all over my head.
He says better staffing would have stopped the attack earlier.
You're not paid to go to work and be assaulted. Nobody is. I enjoyed my job, I loved it, and I had to retire early because I was seriously assaulted. And I wouldn't recommend that job to anybody just now. Not if you want to live.
It is illegal for prison officers to take formal industrial action, But they say if their concerns are not met by the end of next week, they will consider what kind of action they can take. Carl Dinnan, News at 10 at Brixton Prison in South London.
The last remaining children and young men still in the migrant camp in Calais, known as the Jungle, have been caught in the middle of an argument between France and Britain about what should happen to them. Charities claim hundreds have the right to come to Britain, but France can wait no longer and today bus them away to 60 other parts of France. They can still fill in the paperwork to come here, though. Before today's clearance began, there were around 1,500 unaccompanied children in the camp. Officials in France say around 800 have the right to come to the UK, although the Home Office say they will only accept a few hundred. That will be on top of the around 300 who have already been brought here, where they will be resettled.
It looked like everyone left last week, but actually, these teenagers were left behind. Now, they think they know where they're heading. It's the final push to clear the very last of the Calais camp, and this coach setting off at 8 a.m. this morning, the first of 60 to leave over the next 2 days. And let me see your wristband here for the bus. These wristbands allocate them to a coach.
Come. It's UK team.
UK? You think you're going to the UK? Yeah. Today we happen to spot 15-year-old Jonah. How are you?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah?
Very cold, very hungry.
We first met him 3 weeks ago. As a persecuted Christian Eritrean, lawyers said he would be eligible for the UK, but today a bus takes him elsewhere in France.
Bus, but for 22 bus.
This was the Calais camp 10 days ago. This is it cleared. Only sparse shipping containers left, fitted with bunk beds to house children as winter sets in. When the kids go, the crates go too.
It doesn't seem right that we should be choosing. It can be very confusing for the children themselves. So many of these children here have cases that have been documented by lawyers, and the cases have started to be worked through, and then they're left in limbo.
There's a party atmosphere here in Calais. An impromptu band has just set up, but many of these children still believe they're heading towards the United Kingdom. Indeed, some of the shouting you can hear, the children saying, "We love you, England." But today they're getting on coaches and they're heading around France. They're being taken to far-flung corners of France because the authorities don't want them to easily be able to get back to Calais. Today, the UN criticised both the French and British governments for letting children live in what they called inhumane conditions. Having now laid on coaches and accommodation, the French believe the British should have done more.
They've had more than 6 months to get here. Meanwhile, we have had to deal with these 10,000 people. It's not acceptable.
Tonight, these children arrive in Carcassonne, the south of France and the French Alps, with the Home Office in tow. Warmer and safer conditions, but for the many eligible children, Britain will feel even further away. Allegra Stratton, News at 10, Calais.
And finally, English football's history makers of last season, Leicester City, haven't quite done it again. Not yet anyway. They needed to win tonight in the Champions League to go through to the knockout stages for the first time ever. In the end, they needed this late save from their keeper Kasper Schmeichel to secure a 0-0 draw away to FC Copenhagen. Leicester remain top of their group, though, and should still go through. It wasn't a good night, though, for Spurs, who played their match against Bayer Leverkusen at Wembley. Sissoko had one of their best chances, but they lost 1-0. Their hopes of reaching the knockout stages now look pretty slim. And you can see more of those highlights and reaction from the managers a little later after the news from your part of the UK. A look ahead to tomorrow then. As we mentioned earlier, the Bank of England will publish the latest inflation figures at noon and at the same time decide whether to put up interest rates. The High Court is due to deliver its verdict on whether MPs should be involved in the Brexit triggering mechanism. Article 50, the government has said it does not need to consult Parliament. And there'll be a report by MPs into the pressure on accident and emergency departments. That and all the details in it are coming out overnight. And that is it for tonight. Raggy will be here tomorrow, but from me and the whole of the News at 10 team, good night.